My mother said the word nothing like it was my name. She said it in a room full of strangers under fluorescent lights in front of a woman in a gray blazer who had the authority to decide what happened next. She looked right at me and told the mediator that I had contributed nothing to this family, that I had always been the one who took and never gave back, and that if there was any justice left in Mon County, the property would go to someone who actually deserved it. I didn't flinch. I had a brown leather bag on the floor beside my chair, and inside that bag was everything I needed to end this, but I waited. The mediation was held on the second floor of the Mon County Civic Center, a building that smelled like floor wax and old coffee. It was a Wednesday in January, cold enough that I could see my breath walking in from the parking lot. I had driven 4 hours from Charlotte the night before and slept at a Holiday Inn off the interstate, with the heater rattling against the wall. I hadn't slept well. I rarely did when I knew I was going back to Garner Falls. I grew up in a house on Piedmont Lane, a narrow road lined with sugar maples that turned gold every October. My parents bought that house the year I was born. My father was an electrician. My mother worked the front desk at a pediatric clinic 3 towns over. We were not poor, but we were the kind of family where money was discussed in whispers, and arguments about it were loud. I had an older brother named Kyle who was 2 years ahead of me in everything, and according to my parents, better at all of it. Kyle played varsity baseball. Kyle got into NC State on a partial scholarship. Kyle married a woman named Brittany, who brought potato salad to every family gathering and laughed at my father's jokes with the sincerity of someone auditioning for a permanent role. Kyle was the story my parents liked to tell. I was the paragraph they skipped. I was not a bad student. I was not a troubled kid. I simply did not do the specific things my parents had decided mattered. I didn't play sports. I read too much. I worked part-time at the county library starting at 16 and preferred it to being home. I applied to UNC Greensboro without telling anyone and got in with a scholarship that covered most of my tuition. When I told my mother, she looked at me like I had announced I was moving to the moon. My father asked how much it would cost him. I told him nothing. He said, "Good." I left for college at 18 and I did not come back in the way they expected me to. I visited on holidays. I called on birthdays, but I stopped performing. I stopped pretending that Kyle's accomplishments made me feel inspired rather than invisible. I stopped laughing at dinner when my father made jokes about how I was going to end up teaching at some school nobody had heard of. I just got quiet. And in my family, quiet was the same as gone. The person who noticed I was still there was my grandmother. Her name was Ruthie. She was my mother's mother, a woman who had lived in Garner Falls her entire life and had somehow managed to remain curious about the world beyond it. She kept a small house on Lark Hill Road with a garden out back and a porch swing that creaked in a rhythm I could hear in my sleep. She read the newspaper front to back every morning. She listened to jazz on a radio in the kitchen that was older than I was. She never once asked me why I wasn't more like Kyle. Ruthie called me every Sunday evening during college. She asked me what I was reading. She asked me about my classes. She never gave advice unless I asked for it. And when she did, it was always the same kind of advice. Be honest with yourself, even when it's inconvenient. She said that most people spend their lives performing for an audience that isn't paying attention, and that the bravest thing a person can do is stop. I graduated summa cum laude. I didn't tell my parents about the Latin honors because I knew it would become a comparison. Kyle didn't graduate with honors. Mentioning mine would have felt like a provocation. So I just said I finished. My mother said, "That's nice." And my father asked if I had a job lined up. I did. I had accepted a position with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services as a program analyst. Within 2 years, I was promoted. Within 4, I was leading a compliance team overseeing Medicaid fraud investigations across 11 counties. I was good at it. I was very good at it. The work involved combing through financial records, identifying patterns of deception, building cases that could withstand legal scrutiny. It required patience, precision, and the ability to sit in a room full of people who underestimated you and say nothing until the right moment. I never told my family any of this in detail. My mother asked once what I did, and I said I worked for the state. She said that sounded boring. My father never asked at all. Ruthie knew. Ruthie knew because I told her, and because she was the kind of person who remembered what you told her and followed up. She would call me on Monday evenings after my Sunday visits to the office and ask how a particular case was going. She remembered the names of my colleagues. She remembered the county where I had found a billing discrepancy that led to a 6F figure recovery for the state. She told me she was proud of me the way other people say good morning, like it was simply a fact about the day. When I was 29, Ruthie was diagnosed with early-stage kidney disease. She told me on the phone in her usual manner, which was straightforward and free of drama. She said the doctor had explained the situation and that she intended to manage it sensibly. I asked if she needed anything. She said she needed me to stop worrying. I started sending her money. Not large amounts, but steady ones, $300 a month, transferred directly to her bank account. She used it for her medications and her groceries, and once to fix the porch swing when the chain rusted through. I know this because she wrote me a letter about it. She wrote me letters the way some people breathe regularly and without thinking about it. I kept every one of them. Over the next 3 years, I sent her a total of just over $14,000. I also drove to Garner Falls once a month to check on the house, mow the lawn when it needed it, and sit with her on the porch while she told me stories I had heard before, but never got tired of hearing. My parents lived 12 minutes from Ruthie's house. In those 3 years, according to Ruthie's own account in a letter she wrote me on September, my mother visited 11 times, my father visited twice. Kyle visited once at Christmas and brought Brittany, who brought potato salad. Ruthie died on a Saturday in November. I got the call from her neighbor Edna, who had found her sitting in the porch swing with her eyes closed and the radio still playing. The doctor said it was her heart. It happened quickly. She would not have suffered. I drove to Garner Falls that night. I let myself into her house with the key she had given me years earlier, slipped into a birthday card without ceremony. The house smelled like lavender and old books. Her reading glasses were on the kitchen counter next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. I sat at her kitchen table and cried for the first time in years. Not the kind of crying that comes from shock, but the kind that comes from understanding that a very specific silence has entered your life and will not leave. Ruthie's will was simple. She left the house on Lark Hill Road to me. Not to my mother, not split among the family, to me specifically by name, with a handwritten note attached that said, "You showed up. That's all I ever needed." My mother found out within a week. I know because Kyle called me, which he almost never did, and told me in a strange voice that Mom and Dad were upset and that the whole thing felt unfair. I asked him how many times he had visited Ruthie in the past year. He paused for a long time and then said that wasn't the point. 2 weeks later, I received a formal notice that my parents were contesting the will. The document, prepared by an attorney named Donald, argued that Ruthie had been in cognitive decline during her final years, and that her decision to leave the property to me, rather than to her own daughter, reflected confusion rather than intent. They requested mediation, and I agreed because I knew exactly what I was walking into, and I had spent 6 years building cases against people who thought paperwork didn't matter. The mediation room had a long table, plastic chairs, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot. The mediator was a woman named Sandra Oaks, mid-50s, calm in the way that people who have heard every kind of family argument become calm. She wore a gray blazer and small silver earrings, and she looked at everyone in the room with the same measured attention. My parents sat on the other side of the table with Donald, a tall man with a neat beard who carried himself like someone accustomed to being the most prepared person in the room. My brother sat behind them, not technically a party to the dispute, but present in the way Kyle was always present, as a reminder of the version of the family that worked. Pewitt spoke first. He was thorough. He described my mother's lifelong relationship with Ruthie. He emphasized that my mother was Ruthie's only child. He noted that my mother had provided companionship and emotional support throughout Ruthie's illness. He mentioned medical appointments, phone calls, holiday visits. He painted a picture of a devoted daughter who had been inexplicably passed over in favor of a granddaughter with a history of emotional distance from the family. Then he addressed me directly. He noted that I had left Garner Falls at 18 and had maintained only minimal contact with the family. He described my visits as infrequent and my involvement in Ruthie's care as negligible. He used the word absent 3 times. He used the word arranged twice. He did not raise his voice. My mother asked to speak. Sandra Oaks nodded. My mother stood slowly, and I could see that she had prepared for this. Her posture was straight. Her voice was controlled. She talked about raising me, about the years of trying to connect with a daughter who preferred books to family dinners, who chose silence over conversation, who left home the first chance she got and never seemed to look back. She talked about the empty chair at Thanksgiving. She talked about calling my number and getting voicemail. She talked about the particular kind of grief that comes from losing a child who is still alive. And then she looked at me, and her composure cracked just enough to let something harder through. She said that I had always been the difficult one, that I had taken everything this family offered and returned nothing, that I was in the end not the daughter she had hoped for, that the house should go to someone who had actually earned a place in this family, rather than someone who had spent a decade running from it. The room got very still. A man in the back row, someone I didn't recognize, shifted in his seat. Sandra Oaks wrote something on her notepad without looking up. My father didn't speak, but he nodded. Kyle looked at the floor. Pewitt moved moved to continue his argument. Sandra Oaks raised her hand slightly. She looked at me. "Miss Mercer," she said quietly, "would you like to respond?" I reached down and opened my leather bag. I pulled out a folder, a thick one, and I placed it on the table. "I did not rush, I said, but I'd prefer to let the documentation speak first." I handed the folder to the clerk. Inside was every letter Ruthie had written me over 8 years. 43 letters, most of them 2 or 3 pages long, many of them with my letters attached, which she had kept and returned to me in a bundle 6 months before she died, with a rubber band and a sticky note that said, "For the record." Inside were bank statements showing 38 consecutive monthly transfers to Ruthie's account. Inside were receipts for property tax payments I had made on the Lark Hill Roadhouse for the past 2 years after Ruthie mentioned casually on the phone that the bill had gone up and she was thinking about letting it slide. Inside was also a letter on official state letterhead from the Director of Compliance at the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, confirming my position as Senior Program Analyst and Lead Investigator on the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. Hewitt saw the letterhead. He looked at it for a long moment. Sandra Oaks went through the folder with the kind of careful attention I recognized from my own work. She read slowly. She paused at certain letters. She examined the bank records. She spent a long time on the property tax receipts. Then she picked up the state letter and read it twice. She set it down. She looked at Poot. "Counselor," she said, "were you aware of Miss Mercer's professional background?" Poot cleared his throat. "I understood her to be a state employee in an administrative capacity. She leads fraud investigations for the state of North Carolina." Sandra Oaks said she has spent the past 6 years building evidence-based cases for a living. She paused. "I mention this only because the documentation she has submitted is, as you might expect, thorough." She turned to my parents. "The record shows that Miss Mercer made consistent financial contributions to Mrs. Ruthie Barlow's household over a period of more than 3 years. The deedant's own letters confirm receipt and express gratitude. The property tax records indicate that Miss Mercer prevented a lien from being placed on the house in question." She set her pen down. "The picture presented this morning described an absent granddaughter who contributed nothing. The documentation tells a different story. My mother was looking at me. Her expression had changed. It was not anger anymore. It was something closer to bewilderment. The look of someone who has walked into a room they thought they knew and found the furniture rearranged. "I didn't know any of this," she said. Her voice had lost its courtroom edge. "You never told us." I looked at her steadily. "I thought about all the years of calling home and being asked nothing. I thought about every holiday where the conversation was about Kyle's promotion, Kyle's new house, Kyle's baby on the way. I thought about the silence that forms when you stop offering information, because every time you do, it's either ignored or turned into an argument." "You never asked," I said. The room held its breath. Sandra Oaks reviewed the documents for another 20 minutes. She asked Poot whether he wished to present additional evidence of cognitive decline. He produced a letter from a physician who had seen Ruthie once 8 months before her death, noting mild memory concerns. Sandra Oaks compared it to Ruthie's letters from the same period, which were lucid, detailed, and included a particularly sharp observation about a property tax increase that she had calculated to the penny. "The evidence does not support a finding of diminished capacity," Sandra Oaks said. "The will stands." Poot gathered his papers quickly. He shook my parents' hands and left. Kyle followed him out without looking at me. My parents stayed seated. My mother was staring at the table. My father was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, something between recognition and regret, as if he was seeing a person he had been standing next to for years without ever turning to face. The mediator left. The clerk left. The room emptied the way rooms do when something private is about to happen. My father spoke first. His voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "What exactly do you do?" he asked. Not as a challenge, as an actual question. I told him, "Not everything but enough. The compliance work, the investigations, the years of building a career that had nothing to do with Garner Falls. Not because I was running from something, but because I was building something." I told him about the cases I had worked, the patterns I had uncovered, the careful accumulation of a professional life built on the belief that evidence matters more than assumptions. He listened the way people listen when they realize they have been wrong about something fundamental. Not with shame exactly, but with the heavy quiet of someone recalculating. My mother spoke next. She did not look at me. She looked at her own hands. "I said things today that I should not have said," she told me. She said it plainly. "No performance, no tears. I called you nothing. That was wrong." I waited. "I was angry," she continued. "I was angry because my own mother chose you over me. And instead of asking why, I decided I already knew the answer. I did not tell her it was fine. It was not fine. But I told her I had heard her, and that hearing someone is not the same as forgiving them, but it is the first step in the same direction. I told them I was going to fix up the house on Lark Hill Road. I told them Ruthie's garden needed attention, and the porch swing chain should be replaced again, and the kitchen radio still worked, but the antenna was bent. I told them that if they wanted to see what Ruthie had left behind, they were welcome to come by. My mother nodded. She opened her mouth as if to say something else, then closed it. For the first time in my life, she seemed to understand that some things don't need to be said immediately. That sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is let a silence sit. I drove to Ruthie's house that evening. I let myself in. The crossword puzzle was still on the counter. I picked up her reading glasses, held them for a moment, and set them back down. I sat on the porch swing in the cold January dark and listened to the chain creak. The following Saturday, my mother arrived alone. She brought a pair of gardening gloves and a flat of winter pansies. She didn't say much. She knelt in the dirt beside the garden bed and started pulling weeds. I knelt beside her. We worked in silence for an hour, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled because it is already doing something. When she finished, she stood up and looked at the garden, and then at the house, and then at me. She said she hadn't known how to talk to me because she had never understood me, and that instead of admitting that she had decided I was the problem, I told her that I had done something similar, that I had decided she would never understand me, and that I had stopped trying because it was easier than being disappointed. That we had both chosen silence for different reasons and ended up in the same place. She asked if we could try again, not from the beginning because that is not how time works, but from here. I told her I would like that. I told her it would be slow. I told her there would be conversations that felt uncomfortable and questions that didn't have easy answers, and probably a few more silences before we figured out how to fill them. She said she understood. Then she asked me for the first time in my adult life a question about my work, a real question. She asked me what it was like spending your days looking for the truth in other people's paperwork. I thought about it for a moment. Then I told her it was a lot like family. You start with what people show you and then you look for what they don't. The truth is almost always in the gap between the two. She smiled. It was small and uncertain and it didn't fix anything. But it was hers and it was real. Ruthie used to say that people don't change in big moments. They change in the small ones that nobody sees. A question asked honestly. A glove offered without explanation. A Saturday spent on your knees in someone else's garden. I don't know yet if my mother and I will get where we need to go. I don't know if my father will show up next weekend or if Kyle will ever call. But I know that for the first time in a long time, someone in my family asked me a question they didn't already have an answer to. And I know that Ruthie, wherever she is, would say that's enough to start with. If there is someone in your life you think you understand completely, a daughter, a mother, a sister you haven't spoken to in years, let me ask you something. When was the last time you asked them who they actually are instead of deciding for yourself? Because I promise you, the answer might change everything. And if you don't ask, you might never know what you almost